Has anyone here read From Hollywood to the Himalaya? It's by a woman named Sadhvi. Sadhvi is her Swami name. She is an American woman who went to India with her husband, her former husband, because he wanted to find a guru. He was on a spiritual quest and he was filled with desire to find a spiritual guru. And so he convinced her to go to India. Now, she didn't particularly care about finding a guru. She wasn't particularly spiritual. She was a nice Jewish girl from Los Angeles who'd had a very privileged upbringing. And she was a PhD student in psychology at Stanford University. So she was getting her upper graduate degree at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. So she was a big brain. And she went along to India basically because she likes vegetarian food. And she thought, well, it'd be really fun to eat vegetarian food in India. That's the whole reason she went with her husband. So they go to one of the all-time most spiritual cities because he's certain he'll find a guru there. And it's called Rishikesh. And Rishikesh is where the Beatles went with the Maharishi. Rishikesh is at the base of the Ganges. It's very near like the beginning of the Ganges. And Teresa says her husband went there. Yeah. And it's absolutely life-changing. One of my astrology mentors used to live in India and used to go to India. And he said when he went to Rishikesh, he was so blown away. He said it was like being on another planet because it's it's believed in Hinduism that the best place to basically bring your body after you die is to the Ganges. It's thought that the river is like a goddess and that it's a healer and that it's this spiritual, very spiritual body of water. And that so what they do quite regularly in India is they cremate their dead on these beautiful rafts, and they essentially create like a fire on a raft and they cremate their dead as they float down the Ganges. And it's very dramatic for a Westerner to see this, to see whole families, bringing their dearly departed and putting them on a wooden raft and basically lighting them on fire and waving them down the river. It's intense. Okay. So Sadhvi goes with her husband, and that was not her name at the time. I don't remember her name. And he gets to Rishikesh and he gets this, this like inner desire to go to another part of India, but he feels that he should go alone. So he says to his young 20-something-year-old wife, like, I'm going to go. I have this dream and I really believe I'm going to find my guru in this other town and I'll be back in a few days. And she agrees. She wants to be supportive. So she's, a nice girl from Los Angeles. She says goodbye and she starts exploring Rishikesh. And she's on a walk one day after, being there just a very short time. And she passes a building and all of a sudden she can't walk. She's like trying, and she said it was as though her feet were stuck in cement. Like she just could not get her feet to move any further. And so, she's trying to go this way and she can't. Like there's this weird force stopping her. So she turns and in front of her is this beautiful temple. And she thinks to herself, well, what the hell? I'll just go see what's happening there. And she runs into some people going into the temple and they say, come, there's a talk and there's meditation and there's beautiful food and, come along. And so she goes in and sure enough, there's this beautiful room and this man on, at the front of the room, and he's giving a spiritual talk and she sits at the back of the room. And she just enjoys the talk. Well, someone asks her, her name and says, would you like to meet our teacher? Would you like to meet Guruji? And she says, sure. And so she's introduced to the man who was giving the talk. And he's very beloved by the people there. And he asks her about herself. And she says, oh, well, I'm studying psychology. And he asked her about her life, and he asked her about her family. Well, Savi had had a dramatic experience as a child. She had her biological father had actually molested her. And she doesn't go into in the book how old she was or how many times it happened, but it was very traumatic for her. And as a young adolescent, she struggled with eating disorders. Her parents broke up. She didn't see her father again. And she really struggled with depression and eating disorders. And she'd been to actual rehab places, and she'd done all this work for years and years and years, like hundreds and hundreds of hours of therapy. And now it was part of what was her calling to be a therapist herself, and why she was getting a PhD in psychology. And so she starts to tell this Indian man her story that she had told many, many times. Oh, I had this very difficult childhood, and I had this very terrible father, and he really, betrayed my mother, and, took these, blah, blah, blah. She tells her story that she had told many, many, many times. And this story had always garnered tremendous empathy from people. It had always brought incredible compassion from people. People were always very kind and very thoughtful and showed great care and concern. And this man simply said to her, are you going to be telling that story on your deathbed? And she said, what? She was quite taken aback, right? Because he offered no empathy, and he gave no support, and he wasn't shocked by it, and he didn't respond in a way anyone had ever responded. And she said, well, no, of course. And he said, are you going to be talking about it when you're old? And she said, I don't know. And he said, well, when are you going to put this pain behind you? And no one had ever asked her that. No one had ever offered that as a possibility. He said, when will you put this burden down? And then he made a suggestion. He said, give this pain to the river. And again, she was taken aback, and she said, I'm sorry, what? Okay. So she was a very intellectual, erudite, scholarly, academic Westerner. And here's a guy in a robe called a guru telling her that her most painful, traumatic, terrible experience that happened when she was young and vulnerable, that has shaped her entire life to this point, that it was something she could simply decide to put down. And she didn't know if she should be offended or angry, or, if this man was like a nut job. She knew nothing about him. But he looked at her with tremendous compassion, actually. And he said, it's a terrible thing your father did, and it does not need to define your life. And you can give this pain and this memory to the river. So at sunset, go to the river and offer your pain. And she thought, what the hell? He's probably completely off his rocker. And you know where this is going. So she does. She stays for food. She meets some other people. They welcome her and invite her back later. They say, come back. We have these beautiful ceremonies on the river every night, blah, blah, blah. She goes down into the river. She goes into the water. It's very cold, you guys. It's a melting glacier is what the Ganges is. She goes into the river and she does this whole kind of, she says this prayer to the river. She says, please empty me of my pain. Take this pain. I offer it to you. And she suddenly has a vision of her father, and she sees him in her mind's eye. And instead of hating him, and instead of being angry with him, and instead of wanting to harm him or tell him off, she actually sees that he himself is filled with pain and that he himself is broken. And she feels this incredible shift in perspective. And she feels nothing but compassion for him. And she offers her forgiveness to him. And she feels this whole heart opening. And she emerges from the river and can no longer locate her pain. And it completely blows her mind. It just completely blows her mind. This whole way of being, this whole identity, this whole sense of self, this whole story of I am damaged, I am traumatized, I am harmed, I am broken. This happened to me during important brain development years. It caused, all kinds of cascading feelings and self-esteem issues and on and on, right? Instead, she could no longer locate the pain and she could no longer locate the feelings. And so she went, oh, maybe I should go back for that thing they're doing later, and maybe I should go tomorrow. So what ends up happening, you guys, is her husband returns a few days later, having not found a guru. And she says, well, guess what? I have. And he's wonderful, and come and meet him and let's have a guru together. And he's angry. He says, this was my trip and this was my quest and this was my mission. And what do you mean you have found a guru? And this was supposed to be for me. And he doesn't want to meet her guru. And he storms off and they get divorced and she stays in India and becomes a monk. Okay. How incredible is that? And she becomes the guru's right-hand woman and she starts leading talks herself. And he insists she comes back to America. Anyway, I really recommend you read the book. And I just told you the best part, which is that, ladies, her story is dramatic and it's extreme, but we are all just like Sadhvi. We all have stories, right? It's called From Hollywood to the Himalaya. From Hollywood to the Himalaya. And it might be Himalayas. Sometimes people plural it, sometimes they don't. It is so beautiful. And I've been privileged to meet that guru and sit with Sadhvi in a room full of people. She's very dear friends with Ariel Ford. Did any of you read Ariel's novel about going to India? She went to Rishikesh in the novel, and Sadhvi is a character in the book. So I highly recommend Ariel's novel. It's really, really, it's so good. And what is the name of her novel? Oh my gosh, it's completely fell out of my brain.
It's
Love Thief,
excuse
maybe?
me. Yeah,
The Love Thief. Yes. So that all is all set in Rishikesh. And yeah, so we're all like Sadhvi, right? We all have like our traumas and our wounds and our pain and our story of why we are broken, or why we are stuck, or why we can't have more than we have, or we can't hold more joy than we hold, or why we respond to life in difficult ways sometimes, or negative ways. And it's very, very healthy and important. I'm a giant fan of psychology. I'm a giant fan of therapy. It's extremely valuable to find out what shaped us and why we are who we are and what happened in our formative years. And there's a point with which we have to be very careful, right, of being married to that story and staying small and staying safe and wearing our pain and our losses and our harms and our hurts and our rejections and our betrayals and our disappointments almost as badges of honor and as the way we show up in the world, right? Like, you know, this is all I can be because of this. So thinking about this new year, what would you be capable of? What could you have? What could you do if you left your burden behind? What could you do? What could you have in the new year if you took your story and simply put it down? You know, so I was so moved by this story and by Sadhvi's story, uh, that I've started talking with clients this way. Like, listen, what if you just put that down? Like, what if you just let that, like, yes, you can stay in that story of you were cheated on, you were, no one asked you out for 12 years, no one, right? Somebody slept with your sister that you thought was in love with you. Like, you can keep that, right? And you can stay there. But what if in 10 years you're like on your porch in a rocking chair with your dream man going, can you believe that weird little chapter in my life, that tiny little footnote? What if that betrayal could become a tiny little footnote? What if that disappointment, what if that horrible trauma was just a footnote and not a defining moment and not a shadow over your future and not something interfering with your whole destiny, right? And are you ready to give up the excuse and the thing that gets you attention, or the thing that makes people ask less of you or expect less of you, right? Are you ready to give up all those secondary payoffs, right? And so it's really what I find a lot is a lot of us decide our fate, right? We decide what we're capable of. We decide what's going to happen, or what we can and can't have. What I run into all the time in coaching people is they'll tell me how it's going to go before they've even started. They'll say, well, that won't work, and that'll be too hard, and that's going to take so much time, and I'm going to meet so many losers, and I'm going to be so overwhelmed, and oh, my friend had this happen, therefore I'll have that happen. People tell me the movie before they've even bought the ticket. So, and I'm like, what if it doesn't go that way? What if it's fun? What if it's easy? What if it's, and I know I'm using dating as an example, but it really, with anything, this stuff applies, right? Or do you want to stick with that story? Because you can, you can. So what do you really want this year? And what story no longer serves you? No longer serves you. Again, it's really valuable to know why we're screwed up the way we're screwed up, right? To go, you know what? My dad had this issue, and therefore it's hard for me to believe that I can have better, right? Or, oh, my mom had this issue, and therefore I feel guilty when I have more. Those are a couple of mine, by the way, right? And, oh, I'm really good at this thing, but that's my sister's thing, so I don't think I'll do it, right? Or, oh, I really want to have that, but I think my friends would be jealous, and I don't want to rock the boat, so I think I'll stay, right? So I want you guys, it's so hard in this day and age to have any kind of reflection and contemplation anymore, because we're so like on these all the time. I don't know about you, but I used to go on walks and think. I used to think on the toilet, and now I'm looking at Instagram on the toilet, right? So I invite you all, and you guys are introverts, a lot of you, so you're better at this than I am. But I invite you all, and I'm again talking to myself tonight, to reflect. Like, if you could have it really good this year, Would you be willing? Would you be willing? How willing are you to have it be really good this year? And what story do you need to let go of?